All right, we are back with another running back tier ranking video here. A little bit different. Zach is going to be presenting his tiers. I'm going to be hosting it, however way that looks. But obviously, so much has changed. Josh Jacobs apparently
Right.
going to be recording to camp soon. Jonathan Taylor has requested a trade, and so Dalvin Cook got picked up by the Jets. So we really wanted to
Yeah.
bring that and show you the difference of tiers and rankings that we have in our rankings. So starting at tier one here, Zach. Once again, I know you have been indulging in your projections into this year, which is actually really exciting. It's a cool perspective, and we are seeing a lot of things differently. So kick us off with tier one.
Yeah, tier one, there's only one running back that I personally have graded out to see over 350 PPR points. That would be Christian McCaffrey.
Okay.
I know there's potential for Bijan Robinson to be in this category. I know a lot of people are asking the question, well, who do you think will be the number one next year? And I think Bijan's in this conversation, but as a rookie, I don't have him projected to see as much PPR opportunity. These are PPR rankings than I do Bijan Robinson. And I
Right.
also feel like between those two offenses, the 49ers offense projects to be a much better, more complete offense with what we've seen from Brock Purdy, both last year and in preseason. He looks like himself. All their weapons are healthy. This team should be scoring a bunch of points in the, let's say, 30 points per game category.
Right.
So he would be the only one that I would personally have in my tier one.
Okay. So only one running back in the tier one. Okay. So
Yeah.
kick us off with.
And I think, like, if you think about it, like, if you are
Right.
going to draft a running back first, to me, like, CMC, I wouldn't consider anyone over CMC. Now, if CMC is off the board, then we'll have a conversation about who's next. But do you know what I mean? Like, if you're in that top 6 of your draft, to me, CMC is a clear answer.
Yeah. CMC, and then obviously normally goes Justin Jefferson. In a one quarterback startup. So to take us to our tier two, is there any other running backs do you envision even finishing as the RB1 outside of CMC, or is it just CMC?
Yeah, no, there's probably, like, honestly, there's probably like 7 or 8 that I could see,
Okay.
like, the pathway to. But it depends on if the things that we are hearing actually happen. So
Yeah.
in tier 2, I feel like these players are really safe. Austin Eckler, Bijan Robinson. I'm not personally worried about Bijan Robinson being the third on the depth chart. I actually wrote an article about that over on the Flock Fantasy website. Remember, last year, Breece Hall started as the backup to Michael Carter. That didn't last very long, did it, guys? I mean,
Yeah.
so it's not something that I would personally be too worried about. It's not something that would stop me from drafting a talent like Bijan Robinson. Even in his small opportunities in the preseason, you saw how electric he is with the touches that he got. But this is a team that's going to rush the ball a ton. Last year, they ran the ball almost 10% more of the time than they passed it, which is quite drastic. This year, I have them rushing the ball 54% of their offensive touches, and I have Bijan Robinson taking about 58% of their rushing opportunities. That gives them almost 300 rushing attempts, pretty much. And I also have sat him out for about 61 targets. So I think he's going to be an absolute monster. Badake, you and I, we had similar conversations last year about Breece Hall. You remember what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
100%.
at some point, you just believe that talent is going to be a league winner. It's going
absolutely.
to be something that you can't keep off the field.
I mean, if you're not going to spend a top 8 pick in the NFL draft and say he's a third string behind Tyler Algier, who was a 4th round pick, or fifth
And if you
round
do,
pick.
you probably shouldn't have your job.
Yeah, exactly. So it makes sense. I'm completely backing you there with Bijan. If you're stressed about that, please don't be. You should still be drafting him. He should still be a first round running back in your home leagues, redraft leagues. I mean, underdog leagues, whatever the case may be. He is a first round pick coming into this year. Take us to a tier 3 now.
Okay, so this is where the next 2 tiers are going to be really interesting for people.
Okay.
And I think there might be some disagreements, but here's what I would just encourage people to open their mindset a little bit, because typically, guys, the way look at the last 5 years, look at the last decade, pre-season fantasy rankings never look like how it actually finishes. Okay. So I just want to encourage people to open their minds a little bit, because my rankings are probably a little bit foreign to what you're going to see on most websites. So here at RB4, this is where I would personally have Tony Pollard, my 4th running back off the board. I think he's worthy of being
Okay.
like a back into the first, early second round pick in your one quarterback format, which is what most people will be playing. But you think about it, last year, Zeke took so much opportunity, pretty much 50% of the opportunity. Look at this depth chart right now. I think we all believe that this will be a very good offense, even though Dak will probably throw some interceptions. We all believe this is going to be a great offense. Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks, Michael Gallup. You got the young rookie Jake Ferguson. It's a complete
Yeah.
team, good
Yeah.
offensive line. But look at the depth chart. How do you not give Tony Pollard at least 50% of the rushing opportunities in this offense? Is it going to be the rookie Deuce Vaughn, who's even smaller than him? Because typically people say Tony Pollard can't handle the workload, even though he's like 212, if I'm not mistaken. He's not
He's
some
bowling
small,
out though.
like
He's bowling out.
he's not like 190 pounds out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So when you look at that depth chart right now, I think the RB2 is actually Rico Dowdle from all indications, which he's kind of just this name that's come out of nowhere. Again, like I don't see anyone really taking a lot of the workload. So at the moment, I currently have Tony Pollard taking 53% of the rushing opportunities. That would give him over 250 rushing attempts.
Okay.
I have the efficiency down. I don't think he's going to be a 5 yards per carry runner, but the volume's going to be way up. And I also think he's going to be a very important player through the air. I'm giving him 12% of the target share, which ends up being about 77 targets. I know it might be crazy to say, but I think we're looking at like a Austin Eckler from 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, you know, when Melvin finally left and he had his opportunity to shine. That's what I'm seeing with Tony Pollard this year. I also have Saquon Barkley in this tier, one of few running backs that I believe will handle, let's say, over 50% of the rushing opportunities and have about 10% of the target share, right? Nick Chubb is also in this category. You know, Nick Chubb is really difficult because, like I said earlier, he's one of those running backs where you're hearing a lot of people say that Cleveland is going to use him in the air. We keep hearing things, but we don't have any proof that that will happen.
Right.
So I do have him at a pretty large target share. I'm giving him 53 targets on the year. If he gets to over 50 targets, he absolutely has a chance to finish as the RB1. But he's another one of those running backs that is going to get so many touches. You can't really burn a pick with someone that safe. And then the last player in my tier 3 would be Josh Jacobs. You know, last year, the Raiders, like, think about this. What was really successful for the Raiders, Badake? Like, just off the top of your head, what would come to mind if I said, what was successful for the Raiders last
Literally
year?
just running the ball with Josh Jacobs.
Running the ball with Josh Jacobs and I guess Devontae Adams, right? He kind of shines always. But if you look at his his rushing market share last year, guys, Josh Jacobs had 80% of the team's rushing attempts. That's not a joke. 80%. I mean, the likes of Nick Chubb was hovering around like 55 to 60%. Ridiculous rushing market share percentage. I have him this year 10% less than that, and he's still someone that I would consider a second-round pick in drafts. 70% of the rushing opportunities, that would give him over 300 rushing attempts. And last year, he was heavily used, not only on the ground, but also in the air. We finally saw him get a respectable target share around 12%.
Right.
I have him projected at 11, so I'm even kind of discounting him a little bit. His ceiling is higher than what my projections show, but he's one of those guys who could hover around 290, 300 PPR fantasy points. If he's healthy, he's a lock for top 10, and all signs are that he's reporting back to camp. So if you bet on him in underdog drafts or in a draft that you did earlier, I think you should feel good about it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So Tony Pollard, Saquon Barkley, Nick Chubb, Josh Jacobs. So Tony Pollard finishing as, I'm assuming, your RB4 coming into this year. That means that I should be seeing you draft him. Are you saying that Tony Pollard is a first-round pick, or is he more...
Yeah, I said that earlier, like back into the first, early second.
Okay,
back into the first, early second. But
okay.
I think what's super important is these are my rankings, and they're backed by projections. But you also have to play the board, you know?
For sure. Because
if I know that I have to take Saquon in the first and Tony will fall to me, then I could draft that way. Do you know what I mean? So just want to clarify.
Absolutely. So take us to tier 4 and tier 5. This is a lot of different people here that we haven't seen in the top 3 tiers so far. So
I know, and I think my number one player in this tier is probably going to cause a lot of controversy in the chat. I am completely open to any questions that you have. to any questions that anyone in the chat has. You know how I talked about how Tony Pollard has virtually no competition whatsoever on an incredible offense.
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound like anybody else this year? That to me sounds like Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon, my first running back in tier 4. Currently have him statted out to get 59% of the rushing opportunities and 11% of the target share, which honestly, that's not that crazy. Last year, something that really raised Joe Mixon's fantasy floor was his usage through the air. In fact, he was at 14% of the target share last year. I have him at 11%, so I have him less than that, and I still have him ranked here. But had 62% of the rushing attempts last year. Samaje Perine was on this team last year, guys. Mm-hmm. And we know Samaje as being a very good pass-catching back, a very reliable runner. When Joe Mixon was out, Samaje was just as good. But now the only people to compete with is Chris Evans and Chase Brown. And I just don't see a scenario similar to Tony Pollard with Rico Dowdle, when Joe Mixon is healthy, he will be the guy on one of the best offenses in the entire NFL. You want to attach yourself to high-powered offenses. That's what you have here in Cincinnati. So Joe Mixon, I know it's a little bit crazy, but when all the projections were put in and said and done, he's my RB8.
Yeah.
After that, I have Derrick Henry, who I think will be fantastic. I have knocked his percentages down a little bit. And that's just because projecting a running back almost into their 30s, you know. But I think we've seen a lot of flashes from Tajay Spears. Even if Tajay takes like 5 to 10% of what Derrick Henry is used to seeing, that will impact him. And we know for a fact that Derrick Henry has not been a pass-catching running back in his history. Think about it, though. Last year and the years before, well, A.J. Brown left, right? Last year, who did he have to compete with target share? There wasn't many people taking away opportunities. Now you have an emerging Treylon Burks, an emerging Chigakonkwo, and you have a DeAndre Hopkins who's going to dominate that target share. So I still think Derrick Henry is going to be a good pick, but he is one of those players where we've seen some injuries in the past couple of years. His body is likely going to break down at some point. Everybody's does. And just someone I'm maybe a little bit more reserved on. Not an offense that I think will be as good as to be honest, you look at all the players on the board so far and all the players in my top 4, the Titans are probably the worst offense amongst those running backs.
And that makes sense, you know, so I guess it just depends. I mean, that's definitely a big disagreement we have once we get into my rankings. But yeah, I mean, Derrick Henry, RB, I'm assuming 9 right now in your rankings.
Yeah, RB 9 right now. Okay. I know he's finished. You know, I know that it's crazy. I know he's finished top 3. You know, last year, and keep in mind these are PPR rankings. Like if you were to ask me what my half PPR rankings are or what my standard rankings are, Derrick Henry is going to be higher than that. You know, but in a PPR format, he ends up at 9 for me.
Makes sense.
2 other running backs I have here would be Travis Etienne and Jahmyr Gibbs. 2 offenses that we really, really like, were great last year and will continue to ascend. I'm not too worried about Tank Bigsby, especially in a redraft format. I do believe that they're going to give Etienne as much work as he can possibly handle. I mean, we heard the head coach himself say he wants him to be around 1,700 all-purpose yards. But even that being said, I've given Tank Bigsby a respectable 30% of the market in that backfield, and I've given Etienne 50%. That would be less than any other running back ahead of him, and he still projects to be someone that's heavily in my top 12. So overall, looking at around 1,400 all-purpose yards for him. I think the touchdowns will go up. I would really encourage people to go out and I don't know the name of him, but I retweeted it, re-xed it. I don't know, whatever. There's been this narrative around the community that Travis Etienne's not a good goal line running back. And what someone did on Twitter, which I retweeted it, you guys can find my Twitter in the description if you want, is they looked at every goal line opportunity, and if you watch it, it's actually really interesting because the offensive line, for whatever reason, when Travis Etienne had a chance to score a touchdown, were in absolute shambles, like meeting him in the backfield almost every carry.
Every single
Super
time,
interesting. And then Jahmyr Gibbs, the rookie. You know, we've talked about how successful running backs who are drafted in the top 15 of the NFL draft have been in their rookie season. All of the beat reports, all of the drums out of camp are super, super positive. And I have him at 14% of the target share. I have him statted out almost 85 targets this year in his rookie season. I don't think it's crazy.
No.
So I'm a big fan of him. All-purpose yards, I have him around 1,300 this year.
Yeah, and that makes sense. All these guys are going to eat in the air. I mean, maybe outside of Derrick Henry, I think he's more of a touchdown running back there in this tier 4. But Joe Mixon, E.T., and Jahmyr Gibbs are all going to get that opportunity. I mean, a quick reminder, Joe Mixon, over 75 receptions, over 60 out of 75 receptions this past year. So I completely agree. Travis Etienne going to take a big bump here. I agree with you. I'm not a big Tank Bigsby guy. 30% of the work share, I think it is decent. So I completely agree there. Don't mind the tier 4. Take us to tier 5 now.
Okay, again, it's gonna get weird. Keep an open mind.
There's somebody in this in the top 4 that you don't have that I feel upset about right now, but we'll probably talk about.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people will be upset, but I feel very confident in explaining the reasons why, But, okay, in my tier 5, give me, not Cam Akers, sorry, Najee Harris. Sorry, Cam Akers.
Come on, Cam.
Out there.
Bring him up, baby.
Give me Najee Harris here. Mm-hmm. Just a really safe player on what should be a pretty good offense. We've seen them look really good throughout the preseason. All reports are good. George Pickens looks primed for a breakout. Kenny Pickett looks pretty we see a second year climb from a lot of quarterbacks. I think Kenny's going to be in the same area. One player that I think a lot of people are going to absolutely hate. This is where I have Alexander Mattison. Currently have him ranked as my RB13.
Oh boy.
We'll talk about that. Okay. Feel free to ask me any questions once I say this tier. Jonathan Taylor here in tier 5. I'm a little bit worried because honestly,
I agree.
I can't think of a situation this bad, this close to the NFL season. They've been on different pages. There's been a lot of stuff in the media, and it's gotten kind of ugly. And now we're hearing that the Colts are allowing him to seek a trade, but they want a first-round pick. Can I tell you, let's go ahead and list off the NFL teams that would be willing to part with a first-round pick and pay Jonathan Taylor a huge contract in this running back market. Let's go ahead and list off those teams. Ready?
Unlucky. I mean,
am I wrong? So what is the conclusion here? We're almost 2 weeks out from the NFL season. Probably less when people are watching this.
Yeah.
What's the conclusion here?
It's tough. It's a tough one. I don't think someone is going to trade for Jonathan Taylor and then give him a contract. I think someone's going to trade for him and then, hey, we'll pay whatever you need to now, and then we'll figure. I think that's kind of going to be the risk that those teams are going to take, and then see how the market resets itself next year. But yeah, look, I agree with you in this tier 5 with Jonathan Taylor being right here. It makes sense.
Yeah, that could be super interesting. The only thing is, why would he request a trade in the first place? I thought it was for the contract.
I just think he's unhappy. I think he's just unhappy with what's happening over there.
Yeah. All right. Next, I would have in this tier James Conner, my guy, as well as Alexander Mattison. I'm completely fine to answer any questions. Then Aaron Jones and Ramondre Stevenson fill out this tier 5.
Okay.
So what questions might arise from my interesting rankings?
For sure. Let's go to one of my guys. I mean, he's a top 12 running back in my rankings. It's Ramondre Stevenson. I think you have him as RB 18 right now, if I'm not mistaken. 17. I mean, I'm assuming you have Zeke, or either Ramondre taking a massive step back this year, or you have Zeke taking up a massive amount of percentage in this backfield, whether it's in the air, goal line, whatever the case may be. But RB 18, that's a big jump from the year before. Ramondre RB 7 this past year. I mean, catching 69 out of 88 balls in the air. I don't see that, in my opinion, regressing, but obviously you might see that a little bit differently.
So, yeah, I hear you. I think keep in mind, guys, that when I'm projecting, I'm trying to think of what will change from last year, because it happens every year. Nothing is ever exactly the same. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And last year, Ramondre Stevenson saw this completely unrealistic target market share, because who did they have to throw the ball to? Honestly, I feel like that was and keep in mind, they also didn't have an offensive coordinator. So why did their offense look so stiff and muddy? Because no one was running it. They're like, Ramondre's pretty good. Let's get him the ball at all times. And Damian was supposed to compliment him, and he was out for most of the year. So a couple things. I still have him at 47% of the rushing opportunities, and I've given Zeke 33%. So when you think about it, I don't feel like that's unrealistic. I think Zeke's going to play an important part. So purely from a rushing perspective, I feel very comfortable projecting that. And then in his target share, I have him coming down from 17%, which is just like historically, that's just kind of insane, to about 12%. So I still have him around 68 targets, but I do think Zeke will play a part. I've given him about 40 targets in that offense. Zeke is not a bad pass catcher. You know, he is a good pass catcher. And if Leonard Fournette is going to go into a legit NFL offense last year and demand targets, I think Zeke will also do the same. So, you know, I've said this before. I still think Ramondre has a top 12 ceiling, but the entire offense was built around him last year. There wasn't an offensive coordinator. Now we have an offensive coordinator. Keep in mind, we had a quarterback who multiple times last year was actually visibly angry at his staff for not letting him throw the ball downfield, right?
Right.
You have an offensive coordinator in town. You have Zeke, who's a legit compliment. You have Juju, who's just rocked up. You brought in Mike Gesicki. I just feel like the offense will slightly change, and Ramondre is still going to be a good pick. I don't think he has top 5 ceiling. I have him like, let's say, top 12 ceiling. I would personally be really shocked if he meets the same target share that he got last year.
Yeah, okay. I think my only difference here is that, Damian Harris did miss time. He's 26. Zeke's 28. I mean, not that big of a difference if you really think about it, but the mileage on Zeke versus Damian is pretty significant. I would agree Zeke is the better back overall, historically, his career. Completely agree. I just think he can still finish as a top 12 guy coming into this year. I don't think he falls out of my top 12.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess top 15 for you. And we saw Zeke last year. I mean, he finished RB22. Obviously, didn't return that ADP, but still got a decent amount of work in the air. I mean, not decent, but caught 17 out of 23 balls. I mean, got, over 200 attempts on the ground. So he still got the workload. I can see that happening for Zeke, but I don't see the regression for Ramondre Stevenson. But yeah, look, we got to wait and see what that looks like. Another guy I'm really interested in to talk about is Alexander Madison.
Yes, okay.
I'm interested because I'm still in that category, maybe with the community, that we can still see another running back come in. And maybe you do have a projection of, hypothetically, a Kareem Hunt coming in or a Lenny coming in and taking that projection, those opportunities away from him. But I think this offense is going to be, as much as they got Dalvin in the mix, I don't think they're going to get Alexander in the mix to that level. I think they're just going to, you draft Jordan Addison and you have three significant weapons in JJ, Addison, TJ Hawkinson, and I think that's kind of how they're going to run it. But yeah, I mean, this is what he's top 12 for you right now, if I'm not mistaken.
At the moment, he's my RB 13. In my rankings.
Okay.
And I know it's a little bit aggressive. He is my guy. So let me ask you then, and I guess I'll ask people watching, what percentage of the rushing opportunities do you anticipate Alexander Madison getting? Let's just start there.
I mean, I'm assuming more than 60%.
No, I currently have him ranked. I currently have given him about 57% of the rushing opportunities, which that would be about 240 rushing attempts. Now, of course, projections are just like a vague guide. If people get injured or context is out there that we don't know, then it's not worth as much. But this is a team that we've talked about it a lot. They pass the ball a ton. Last year, they were top 3 in passing attempts per game and I believe passing yards per game. And they got rid of Dalvin Cook. They add Jordan Addison. But there still needs to be someone to handle the opportunities that they're going to get. I have them as a bottom 5. I think I have them, fifth lowest in rushing attempts.
Okay.
And I've still, with just giving Alexander Madison 57% of opportunities, he still ends up being my RB 13. I have him just under the 1,000-yard rushing mark. But where I have him as a difference maker is through the air.
Okay.
I've given him 68 targets on the year. And that might sound like a lot, but you have to understand the context of this team. This team is going to pass the ball potentially more than any other team this year, right? Kevin O'Connell, since he has entered as a head coach in Minnesota, only a couple teams have thrown the ball more than him. I believe it was the Bucks with Tom Brady and the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes. So I currently have them as the 3rd highest passing volume offense. Only the Chargers and the Chiefs ahead of them in my projections. And every time that we have seen Alexander Madison be a starter when Dalvin Cook was injured, he got more than 4 targets. So 68 targets on the year. That's about 4 targets a game. It doesn't sound really that unrealistic to me for a starting guy. And I understand that if people out there don't believe Madison is going to be the unquestioned starter, then they would disagree with this. But I do believe that. And the team has also told us that they expect him to step into Dalvin's shoes. I think Ty Chandler's a good back. I think Dwayne McBride's a good back. But I don't anticipate those guys playing huge roles when the team has put so much stock into Madison. They even gave him a 2-year contract when no one's paying running backs. So yeah, I just think he is going to be one of those guys who gets work in the air. He gets work on the ground. If there's someone rushing a touchdown, even though it's, less likely in this offense, it will be him. And then think about this offense. The only defense that gave up more yards to opponents last year was the Lions. And it's like with the Lions and then the Vikings. And there's like a 20-yard difference between the amount of yards given up by defenses for the rest of the NFL. Like they were the worst defenses last year by a country mile. I hate when people say that, but I said it. They were awful. They got rid of Dalvin Tomlinson on their line. They brought in Byron Murphy. They traded Zadarius Smith. This defense is still going to be pretty awful. So to me, the entire Vikings offense is a fantasy factory. Kirk Cousins is going to be incredible. Justin Jefferson is going to be incredible. Jordan Addison should have plenty of opportunities. That also applies to the running back position here with Alexander Mattison. So in a PPR format, I have him ranked there. And like I said, if you're in a half PPR or a standard, he would be lower.
Right. Okay. Look, that makes sense. I mean, a couple things that you said, more targets. Yeah, the offense is going to change, but more targets than what Dalvin got this past year. You have him at 65 targets or 68 targets, I think you said.
Yep.
I mean, that's more than 10 to 12 more targets that Dalvin had last year. Maybe context is different. Maybe he did miss a game or two.
Sure.
I think they lean more on Jordan Addison coming into this year,
rather
than I think he's still going to have a good year, right?
Yeah.
I just don't think he's top 13 in my rankings projections.
Yeah.
But look,
the only thing I would say is like Dalvin had Alexander Mattison behind him, and Alexander Mattison developed a true like kind of third down role. They almost used him more than anyone anticipated. I don't think there's a running back like that behind Madison myself, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I definitely could be the case.
And also, like I said, I project them to throw the ball more.
Do you have anyone?
So there would be more targets to everyone.
Obviously, you would readjust if someone like a Kamara or Lenny gets signed.
Like
to
right
this
now,
team.
there's no Cream, there's no Lenny, but I'd have to adjust.
You have to adjust. Yeah. Okay. Other than that,
just like with Ramondre.
I think JT, James Conner, Aaron Jones are all pretty self-explanatory. I like each and every one of those guys in the tier 5 here. Mm-hmm. All right, coming into the last two tiers, take us to your tier 6 and then 7 here.
Okay, so tier 6, we have another honorable my guy in Miles Sanders.
Yep,
you talk about, it's almost like discount James Conner, or you could see them actually go right beside each other, but these guys are going to be very similar for fantasy purposes. I understand they're different players, but these are two players who are going to dominate their backfields as far as like opportunities, and they're going to get opportunity through the air. Both of these guys might not be on offenses that will be anywhere near the top 10, but they will get a ton of volume and opportunity. And at the end of the day, we see good running backs for fantasy on awful offenses every single year. I think Miles Sanders, they brought him in on that big deal. We literally saw footage of them saying they want to get him over that 50 target mark that he hit in his rookie season. With a rookie quarterback, I think you lean on the run game much more than you would, let's say, if you brought in a Jimmy G, for example, right?
Right.
So more of a veteran. So you kind of lean on that run game. The only thing that really went well for them last year was the run game. Remember, we saw Deonta Foreman look really good in that offense, behind that offensive line. Chuba Hubbard had some good games. So Miles Sanders, I think he's a really safe pick at his current price.
Yeah.
Okay, next Breece Hall. We'll talk about him in a second. Just for the sake of time, let me flesh out this tier, and then you can ask me any questions.
Yeah.
Alvin Kamara, I would have here. Then Kenneth Walker, who it's good to see that he will be back and ready to go week 1. J.K. Dobbins, David Montgomery, and then Javonte Williams. So that is what my tier 6 consists of. Feel free to ask me any questions at all.
Okay, so I think my biggest one, let's start off with Breece Hall. I think a lot of people
Okay.
want to hear this. I think he is a top 20 running back right now, in your rankings, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
I'm
he's
I'm
currently as my RB19.
I'm interested to understand that workload that you kind of projected for him, especially with Dalvin there, and
Yeah.
when do you really see him taking over this workload? Because I think that is the biggest question, especially as we are drafting our home leagues or underdog leagues, whatever the case may be. One, where are you comfortable taking him? Two,
Yeah.
and what are his projections coming into this year? And when does he get
Yes.
the full workload? I guess that's a big question.
So I would say on the entire year, I actually currently have them projected to completely share this backfield.
Okay.
45% of the rushing attempts each is what I'm currently projecting. I don't see a scenario in which there's like a Israel Banikonda, a Michael Carter, like you not having Dalvin Cook or Brees Hall on the field is kind of like why would you do that, right?
Right.
Those guys are going to
Right.
dominate this backfield. So I have them completely sharing the backfield, but I believe that it'll take about 3 weeks for Brees Hall to really get back to someone they can
Four.
rely on.
Mm-hmm.
So at some point we could see Brees be the favored running back, but you don't pay Dalvin Cook eight. Is it $8 million?
Yeah,
Like, it was the
eight and a
highest
half.
highest per year. It's only 1 year, I know, but it was the highest like year salary of any running back in free agency this year. It happened in August. Crazy. But you
Yeah.
don't pay him that money for him just to not be involved, right? So I mean, if we're
Yeah.
talking about Dalvin Cook, I actually think he's the better pick in fantasy drafts. Um, I have him in here in tier 7. But I do think that eventually we will see Brees take over the backfield. Naturally, as you get older, your efficiency might slow down, and I think Brees will be the more efficient. I think he's the more talented running back at this very moment. So I've given Brees about 10% of the target share and Dalvin about 9%. I mean, think about that. That might seem high. Between them, I have them statted out almost 115 targets.
Yeah.
That might seem kind of ridiculous, but if you think about the history of Aaron Rodgers, he has targeted his running backs when they're good receiving running backs a lot. Aaron
Mm-hmm.
Jones, AJ Dillon. I don't see why it would be different. It's like the same offensive coordinator as well in those days,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they saw success with it. So I think Dalvin Cook and Brees Hall are both going to be fine picks. I think unfortunately for fantasy, they kind of cancel each other out as some sort of top 5 ceiling unless an injury were to occur to the other.
Okay, that makes sense. And the next person here I want to talk about is Alvin Kamara. I can see that you have him a little bit higher than it was last time. If I'm not
Yes.
mistaken, you had him in the tier 7 before. I mean, he's a guy I've kind of been raving about.
Yeah.
Depending on the stats or on your strat and how you build, getting an RB3 like Alvin Kamara that can take over this backfield, in my opinion, ahead of Kendra Miller, ahead of Jamal Williams.
Yeah.
RB, what, 21 or 22? I'm assuming you have him now?
Yeah, so at the moment he's my RB20.
Love that.
And
Talk it up.
props to you and props to everyone who I guess just held true and believed that Kamara would be the guy. It's not that I didn't believe he would be the guy. He was always like my number one ranked Saints running back, but I
Mm-hmm.
just thought it would be really, really muddy. I think what I didn't account for enough was what his role would be in the air. So at the moment, I have this backfield really split. About 35% to Jamal Williams and Alvin Kamara as far as rushing attempts.
Right.
And I've got Kendre in there about 22. I think again, projections are only a slight guide. You still need to be aware that anything can happen, injuries can happen, a player can break out and we don't expect it, and he can take over the backfield. That's Kendre Miller for me. So while I am comfortable with Alvin Kamara as my RB20, I'm still in the back of my mind understanding that there is a chance in those first 3 games that Kendre Miller just balls out and the touches are split 3 ways. And that would be disgusting for fantasy purposes.
It would.
And we also saw Kendre Miller catching the ball a lot in preseason so far. But I've given Alvin Kamara 16% of the target share, so 90 targets on the year. And if you look historically, he's typically hovered in his like prime days around 20% of the target share. Last year, it was a low in the last 3 years at 18%. Keep in mind, though, that I am projecting him to miss 3 games, like we all know. So naturally, that target share will come down a little bit when we look at the offense as a whole. So I think what I probably miscounted for was his continued involvement in the air, the improvement of this offense as a whole with Derek Carr instead of Andy Dalton. So yeah, RB20, still someone I'm extremely scared of in Dynasty. I'm still all in on Kendre Miller in Dynasty, but I think in a PPR format, he's safe. In
Yeah.
half PPR and in let's say like a standard, I don't think I'm touching him in standard.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if you look back just a year ago or 2 years ago to 2021, he missed 2 games. He was a top 8 running back.
Yeah.
Similar. It's not a similar situation, but if you really want to project out stats, I mean,
Sure.
and really see, okay, what's the type of pathway Alvin Kamara can get? I mean, I could think he could easily, in my opinion, finish as a top 15, top 20 running back as you have him statted out here. So, yeah, definitely makes sense. There's a pathway for him. And last guy I want to talk about, which, I'm starting to believe in him, especially coming out of preseason, and this will be the last guy in the tier 6 I'll talk about, is Javonte Williams. Got a couple touches here. I think this could be one of the best values, maybe a good solid RB2 coming in if you are, in, once again, home leagues, underdog leagues. I think he's going to return his value here. I'm assuming as your RB25 or 24, it looks like.
Yeah, RB24. I mean, we always hear every year, avoid the dead zone. There's percentages attached to that, and it's good advice to follow. But there's also still league winners that come from the dead zone, right? Javonte could be that. Here's what I'll say. What I saw in preseason was I saw someone who is ready to go week 1, and that's very encouraging. The fact that he's even playing in preseason is very encouraging because it means that the staff is not worried that he's going to re-injure himself. So I do think he begins the year as the guy. But I do have a really healthy opportunity for Samaje Perine in this backfield as well. I've given Samaje 33% of the rushes and 8% of the target share because I think he will play a role, let's say, on third downs like he did in Cincinnati. Still, even then, you look at that depth chart, like is it Tyler Beatty behind them? I'm not sure. Like Javonte is going to eat a ton of opportunities. 48% of the rushing attempts is what I've given him. That's about 237 rushing attempts. And then I'll give him 10% of the target share. Remember, last year, I know it was a different offense, but he was top 3 in targets before he got injured at the running back position. And you might say, well, again, different offensive coordinator now with Sean Payton. That's even better because Sean Payton, in like the past 5 years as a head coach for the Saints, was top 5 in running back usage through the air. So I think Javonte Williams is going to get used a lot. And we even saw it in the preseason. How many screen passes did they try to get, my guy?
Exactly.
I think he's a great value. And, eventually there will be people in this running back dead zone that end up winning people leagues. He's one of those names where the ceiling really isn't capped by Samaje Perine, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, I love Javonte Williams coming into this year. Seeing him in that preseason makes me feel significantly more confident in drafting him in that RB dead zone as my RB2, even RB3 if he falls to you. So, yeah, I love Javonte. All right, last tier here, tier 7. Take us through it here.
Yeah, so we got Rachaad White at the beginning of this one. Feel pretty good about Rachaad White. Pretty good about his usage. This is someone who's facing virtually no competition and is a very good pass catcher. And we've seen a long history of Baker Mayfield dumping the ball off to his running back. So I think he'll be fine in PPR. I then have Dalvin Cook, Cam Akers, Damian Pierce, James Cook, and wouldn't you know it, Jerick McKinnon. Jerick McKinnon is finishing off this tier for me. So no, I'm a little bit lower on some of these players. What questions do we have?
I think the biggest one here for me is Damian Pierce. As much as I love Damian Pierce, he's in the tier 7. Looks like he is just inside your top 30 running backs coming into this year. It's hard not to see him at least finishing as a top 20 running back coming into this year. I feel a lot more confident right now, and it sounds crazy. At this very moment, I feel a lot more confident passing on Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook and getting a Damian Pierce. I feel more confident passing up on a Kenneth Walker with the Zach Charbonnet question marks and waiting a round and a half and getting Damian Pierce at this very moment. Is J.K. Dobbins going to be ready in the season? I feel a lot more obviously every situation is different, but even if you look at weeks 3 to 10 when he really started getting that workload, he was a top 15 running back in that span. It's hard to see him not continuing that.
I hear you,
and I kind of know what you're going to say, but I'll let you argue.
Well, look, I think When I look at projecting some of the worst offenses in the NFL, this would be tippy top for me. The Texans would be close to, if not number one. And I love CJ Stroud. I think he's going to be fantastic. I love
Yeah.
Tank Dell.
Yeah.
But I think we need to be like slightly realistic with what this offense as a whole will end up being. When it comes to the amount of plays I projected them to have, I projected them to have the second fewest plays in the NFL. So I don't think this offense will actually be on the field all that much. Last year, Dameon Pierce with, by the way, virtually no competition in that backfield. He was competing with Marlon Mack, that's just a meme to even say out loud. And then Rex Burkhead, right? The corpse of Rex Burkhead was running around out there. Got 39 targets on the year. I know he's a rookie. That's a little bit disappointing to me. You bring in Devin Singletary, who has been a very reliable, solid pass-catching back. I think there will be more competition for specifically a third down role and targets through the air. I've still statted out Dameon Pierce for 275 touches. Like, I'm still statting him out for almost 300 opportunities. The issue is, I don't think that he's going to be all that efficient as a runner. That's just my personal opinion. I think he's a big, bulky bulldozer guy, but I don't think he's going to be that efficient in this offense. I don't think the offense is going to be that efficient. And I do believe that Devin Singletary and Dameon Pierce could have the same amount of opportunities as pass catchers. So I struggle to see the ceiling. You know, I don't think this offense is going to be very good. We should expect rookie quarterbacks to struggle. Look what Trevor Lawrence did in his rookie year. You know, every rookie quarterback for the past like 5 years outside of Justin Herbert, they've struggled mightily. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of scoring opportunities. I understand he'll be the guy, but I don't see this offense being transcendent.
Yeah, and look, that makes sense, and I think that's what's so great about this is that, you know, we see these rookie quarterbacks lean on these running backs, and they're probably going to lean on the passing opportunity. Out of curiosity, what do you have him stat out in the air for Dameon Pierce?
I've given him 8% of the target share, which would be 45 targets.
Okay.
Like on a better team, that would be a much higher number than 45 targets. But
I mean, I guess he was kind of statted out almost, I guess, projected to kind of do that. I mean, he caught 30 balls out of 39 targets, and he missed the last 3 games. So I guess it's kind of similar to where he was almost projected to finish last year if he would have finished. But look.
I would just say, just quickly, sorry, because I know I'm interrupting. My bad. But,
no, that's fine.
The only difference there for me is the context of this team. Dameon Pierce was literally the only thing at all that was somewhat positive for this team last year. It's different. You're not going to be dumping it off to him as much. You have more competition in Singletary. And now you have these weapons that they probably want to get the ball to more than Dameon Pierce in like a Tank Dell and a John Mechie who's back and a Dalton Schultz, you know? So I don't envision CJ Stroud favoring Dameon Pierce over trying to develop some of these weapons a little bit more. That's the only thing I was going to say.
Yeah. No, that's fine, and that makes sense. You know, I guess the biggest difference is I just see him being really successful on the ground coming into this year.
Yeah, he could be.
And it's not a terrible offensive line, right?
Sure.
Not the worst, but something that they can definitely work on. All right, the only other player I would say that I haven't seen in your rankings here in tier 7, if I'm not mistaken, it's probably Jet McKinnon here.
Yeah.
Obviously finished as a top 20 running back this past year, averaging 11.5 fantasy points, and he was a league winner in the second half of the season. Obviously, Clyde was down, Isaiah Pacheco was up and down, whatever the case may be with him. But tier 7, I'm assuming RB30 around there, or RB32-ish. Talk to us.
So this was really interesting when I finished my projections to see him that high. I just don't see a way he doesn't get a large target share in what's going to be an extremely efficient offense. Last year, from week 9 onwards, Jarrett McKinnon was the RB5 in PPR scoring. The RB5. And they were pretty damn good the back half of the year, weren't they? What did they do? They went to the Super Bowl, and they won the Super Bowl. And let's look at the competition that they've added in the running back room this year. Undrafted free agent Deneric Prince, who I love, but is not going to be a threat to Jarrett McKinnon's role. Look, even if, let's say, Clyde takes some of the opportunities on the ground, that impacts Isaiah Pacheco, in my opinion. I don't see that impacting Jarrett McKinnon. So I have him at 56 targets. But let me tell you, 50, even if it's 45, like 45 targets, like we're talking about Dameon Pierce, in the Chiefs offense is vastly different than 45 targets in the Texans offense. We're now looking at one of the teams that earlier I said will have one of the lowest amount of plays to a team that's going to be top 5 in total plays in the NFL. So just someone that I struggle in a PPR format to not see him being a huge value. And maybe this is just one of those guys I'm going to put my name on, but I struggle to see how he's not inside the top 30 if he plays that same role he did last year. And he played it beautifully. And he was better than Clyde as a pass catcher. He was better than Isaiah Pacheco as a pass catcher. For a team that wants to go back and win the Super Bowl, why not go back to what worked really well to get you there, you know?
Yeah. Look, I can definitely see the pathway. I think my biggest concern there, I think any one of these running backs can be successful. I mean, we saw Clyde, I think in the first 5 weeks, be a top 10 running back, especially in the air. He was getting a lot of those opportunities.
Yeah,
so I think it just really depends on who is going to be the league-winning guy in the second half of the season, essentially,
sure.
whether that's Clyde, Jet, or Isaiah Pacheco. But no, it makes sense. That's it. I mean, I guess somebody I do want to talk about that you don't have in your rankings that I'm pretty interested to hear, and then we can call the video day, is DeAndre Swift. You don't have him in your top 30. Yes, he's with the Eagles. I'm assuming you kind of have Rashad Penny projected significantly better. I know we kind of see that a little bit differently. I think the Eagles, you know, he's going to be the better runner on the ground. And then if there's any opportunity in the air, I think DeAndre Swift is going to be that guy if healthy, obviously, for every single one of those running backs in that backfield.
So I've talked about Swift a little bit before, but, you know, Swift historically has been really good for fantasy per touch because of his work in the air. If you look at the percentage of points that he has scored and where they've come from, it's been over like 55% through the air. This is not a running back who scores a lot of fantasy points on the ground. It's mainly through the air. You look at the offense that he's currently in the last 2 years, DeAndre Swift had 18% of the target share and then 15% of the target share last year with the Lions. That would have been higher if he wasn't injured. So let's just say around 18% of the target share. That's where you're getting what he has been, correct? Which is not a top 5 guy. Let's be honest. Like, we always thought he could be, but he ended up being like a disappointment, right? So even with around, let's say, 18% of the Lions' target share in the last couple of years, he hasn't delivered expectations. He's now going to a team where nobody threw the ball to running backs less. You go that 18%. Last year, the Eagles targeted running backs on 5% of their passing opportunities. Now, yes, it's natural to anticipate that number going up. I have that number for Swift at 7%. That only gives him 39 targets.
Sheesh.
Which is rough. And then when you go to the rushing opportunities in this backfield, you guys tell me who's the RB1 in this team. I have no idea. Kenneth Gainwell is not playing much in the preseason. There's reports that he's the number 1 on this team. There were also reports like that last year, and it wasn't true. Rashad Penny not playing much, probably because he's going to be an important part of this offense. DeAndre Swift was the only one, I think, who played important time in preseason. I could be wrong. I don't want to read into preseason too much because it really doesn't mean that much long term. But essentially what I've done is I've given Swift and Penny the same opportunities as rushers. I've given them both 158 rushing attempts. I've given Gainwell 96. And honestly, I think as a whole, my Swift ranking has maybe less to do with, it definitely has less to do with him as a talent. I think he's super talented, and more to do with avoid running backs in this backfield. Like, that's how I'm completely approaching this year, because I could genuinely see this as a 3-way, maybe a 4-way time split with Boston Scott in there. So yeah, I'm just not really targeting any Eagle running backs myself.
No, that makes sense. It's hard to project, especially. I mean, if Rashad Penny stays healthy, Maybe he picks up that 259 attempts, that over 1,200 yards Miles Sanders leaves behind. He's the bigger back in that backfield, especially, with
and he's been the much better runner efficiency-wise.
Exactly. So, I mean, if Penny does stay healthy, then, maybe he can be the top 15, top 20 running back that we saw Miles Sanders being this past year. But, guys, that is it. If you want to see Zach rankings, my rankings, go to flockfantasy.com/land, the best place to support what we're doing. I'm pretty sure Zach's rankings will be updated by the time this video is out on the site. That's about it. I mean, interesting rankings. Love the projections. Love the numbers. Love the stats.
I know it's different. I know it's different. I've been like tinkering with the projections for a while, so it's good to finally have them done. But I know some of the names I saw when the projection machine came out. I was like, oh wow, okay, this is gonna make people mad.
Yeah. All right, guys. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know what you think of Zach's rankings. And as always, it's all love.
Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, LAND, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy. Even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.